Hey, it's me, the Afro Hamurai. My hair's messy, which means headband. Suave. Sonarworks updated Reference 4 to SoundID Reference, and with it, they brought us a better interface, they brought us better performance, and a few new features. My first impressions were positive, but there were a few features that even from my first impressions as a relative novice were still missing. And for some people, things like MIDI mapping not moving across were really frustrating. I kind of missed some of the translation curves myself. So I thought that I'd do this video to answer a couple of questions about SoundID Reference. First question is it good after the honeymoon period? First impressions, they're always really good, right? However, after you've sat with something for a while, you might get bored of it, you might find things that you don't like about it, maybe it leaves socks everywhere, like I sometimes do. And secondly, would I recommend it? And if so, who would I recommend it for? And what sort of uses would I recommend it for? We're gonna go through this in a pros and cons sort of way. So when Rocco's happy like he is right now, it's a pro, it's something good. When he's upset like that, that means that it's something that we don't like. I should really have made a reversible hat. That would have been really good because then it would have different colors as well. Maybe I should do that later. Our first pro is headphone support. They just keep adding headphones and they're relatively on top of adding newer versions of headphones as well. There was, I think, the TMA2 HDs, which is what I used because it was the closest. About a month afterwards, I saw that they had the exact setup that I had available in SoundID Reference as a correction curve, and I just went straight into it. So genuinely, if you have not only popular headphones, but also some out there headphones, it's really likely that you'll be able to find a curve that will work with it. All of the information about their supported headphones, that's all on their website. So if you're thinking, oh, I want to get myself some headphones, but I want to make sure that they work with SoundID Reference and that I have a general curve rather than needing to do individual calibration, you can just go onto their website and do a bit of a search for it. If you have the application already on your computer, you can just search through all of the different models that are there and see if you can find your one. Individual calibration does exist, which means that if you're getting SoundID Reference and either you want to buy some headphones from them or you want to send your headphones in to be calibrated, you can do that. But unless you really want to spend the time without your headphones, I wouldn't necessarily say it's the main way you're going to use it, at least for my sort of uses. I'm kind of still in that bedroom / dining table producer stage, and the average profiles work okay for me. Although, if you want to have something where you can individually send your headphones off to be calibrated, that's there for you as well. They also have added SoundID Reference for listening within their profiles, and that's mostly for in-ear headphones. They don't have them set up specifically to work for music production, at least they don't say that it's accurate enough compared to what they look for, but it's there. Maybe if you're in a pinch, you could use it to make some informed mixing decisions with some in-ear headphones. Of course, if you have a round ears, or better yet speakers, that's what you're kind of looking to use. Rocco's angry. Safe headroom. I completely understand why it's there. It's annoying for this specific reason. Safe Headroom is a feature that's on to prevent clipping after it's done its calibration, because it will bring stuff down, but it will also boost some stuff up. Safe Headroom never resets itself. And what I mean by that is that if you have your headphones connected in and maybe you switch to a translation curve and then it brings the Safe Headroom down to something like -10 or -11, and then you go back to your previous sound, then it's gonna keep it at that -11. It's gonna keep it way below that safe headroom. I have my audio interface, I have my mixer. Those are loud enough that realistically I can just go, just turn it up a little bit more and that's about it. But if you're like me and you sometimes mix directly from your computer, especially your laptop's headphone output, it's annoying to have to go back into SoundID Reference and turn that gain up to where that level was before. You can MIDI map your volume, so then that way you just go, whoop, there you go, that's it. It would be better if it would just have a default option that would just push it up every time that you go back. and that you could turn on and off in the settings of SoundID Reference. We're back to Happy Rocco because we're talking about translation curves. My two favorite curves are back. The B&K 1974 speaker curve and the X curve, they are back. There were already a lot of translation curves available, but they kind of were more to check to see how it would sound on other devices. The purpose of the translation curves isn't necessarily there for you to say, okay, well, I'm going to mix as if I'm mixing on laptop speakers. That's not what you kind of want to do, but it's there for you to check how your mix translates so that you don't need to go to the car every time. Because as much as I like going to my car, that is a lot of battery that I use in the car, and it did mean that when I needed to start my car, I needed to jump start it. There isn't a quick way to switch to your translation curves from the menu bar. Yet again, I assume you can MIDI map it, but I don't have MIDI mapping set up. I would much rather have in like the little menu bar icon, because I use system wide, a quick bit of like my favorite translation curves that I can just quickly click between. That would be pretty good. Rocco's angry. That means it's a con again, everyone. It's a con. I sometimes don't like the interface of system wide. Not that it looks nasty. When it's on, when you have everything being calibrated, it looks really good, and it absolutely is clear enough for you to see what you need to do. If you have things like calibration disabled, if you're on an output that doesn't need any sort of calibration and you don't have a calibration profile selected, it just keeps showing tooltips. And I haven't found in the preferences anything that you can use to get those tooltips to like not exist, right? There's also no way to customize the interface. The only customization that you get is setting your favorite translation curves. I know there's not a lot to do with the interface, but it would be good to just have a toggle to turn those damn tooltips off. I've used Reference 4 and SoundID Reference for like 3 years now. I know how to use it. Stop it. I know that's a relatively small con, but it is a con nonetheless, and I don't like it. Also, another con, it tends to not really do a good job of self-recovery with its latency. If you have your amount of samples for your audio buffer set to a relatively medium amount, and then you have a safety buffer enabled, if it goes into that safety buffer and then you stop audio, I found that it just sometimes doesn't catch up, and I have to go into preferences of SoundID system-wide, and I have to restart the audio output engine for me to get my latency back down to decent levels. That was on my previous computer. On this computer, I haven't even had to use the safety buffer. I've just left it at, I think, like 64 or 128 samples, something like that. And it just does it. It is better than Reference 4 though. It is better than Reference 4. So if you're looking at having something that performs better than that did, this does perform better. He's happy. Yeah, you can map your MIDI. I haven't used MIDI mapping, so I'm not 100% sure as to how good it is and how far you can go with it. They do have an explanation as to how to MIDI map on their website. The main reason I haven't MIDI mapped is because my controllers that I have don't have enough like sliders and so on for me to really map the MIDI to it. And that is an overview of SoundID Reference for headphones specifically. So I don't use the speaker version because I haven't got a measurement microphone, and also even if I got the measurement microphone, I haven't got a stable desk with a stable seating place where I could calibrate it to. So it would literally be set up the speakers, calibrate them, don't move, and then take them down, and then just keep doing that over and over again. So I'd have to calibrate every time I bring my speakers out, which would just mean I would never bring my speakers out. Now to answer the second question of would I recommend this, and if so, who would I recommend it to? I think that what SoundID Reference does really well is it gives you a consistently flatter monitoring environment, especially on headphones. And what I like about that is that it means that I don't necessarily need to worry about the frequency response of the headphones directly. I still kind of have to worry, like I'm not going to get something that's just wildly inaccurate, but it means that I don't have to worry about little imperfections, and I can look more at things that I like about the headphones themselves. Like, for example, the TMA2 wirelesses that I have and the ability to use them wireless with really low latency, or have the cable go into either side, being able to break them apart, or like my Fostexes, which are like planar magnetic headphones, I can use those and be like, oh, it's great because I get the accuracy of planar magnetic and then also a flatter response because of SoundID Reference. It's just cool to be able to know that regardless of what headphones I plug in, as long as they're supported, I can use them. And even some of my consumer headphones that I had before I sold them, they were on SoundID Reference as well. I remember using my QC35s way back in the day, on Reference 4 in fact, and those were on there, and that was a great way for me to have really good headphones and still use them for music production, even though they were geared more towards just casual listening and noise cancelling. So you can get a lot of stuff to work with SoundID Reference. My recommendation would be that if you're in that stage where firstly you're mostly using headphones for your monitoring, and also that you're relatively new to music production, this might be good to help you out with making better mixing decisions. I definitely find that before this, I was kind of having to hope that my mixes were going okay, and I spent a lot of time bouncing them out, putting them onto my phone and then listening to them through my earbuds, putting them onto my phone and putting them into the car, putting them on my phone and playing it onto my speakers, onto my TV, like finding lots of different ways to translate my mixes. Whereas I can use SoundID Reference, especially the system-wide version, to listen to music that's like my music as if it were flat, and then use that to help me mix my stuff better. And genuinely, I just use it every time. Like, I'll use it when I'm mixing my audio for my videos, I'll use it when I'm making music. Sometimes I'll just use it when I just want to listen to music because it genuinely adds a bit of extra flavor to my Fostexes. I need to review those because I really love those headphones. That's where I would recommend it. It's great as a tool, especially system-wide, to flatten out your frequency response. What SoundID Reference won't do is automatically make your mixes good. What it does is it helps to make your monitoring more consistent, and it helps to make it more revealing so it's easier for you to make good decisions. So of course, you're still going to need to know how to mix, or at least do a lot of exploration with your mixing, using this as a tool to help you hear what's going on with your track a bit easier. If you're the person who has their headphones or has had their headphones for quite a few years, and you felt like you've been able to mix everything perfectly well, then you most probably don't need SoundID Reference. It might be worth giving it a try, because I believe you get a 14-day trial on it. That's what got me hooked on Reference 4. But I don't necessarily feel like you have to get this to create good mixes. I find it really easy to make good mixes with it, and I genuinely think it would have taken me a lot longer to get to the point where I'm making consistently good mixes. But at the same time, there are people who have mixed without this and have just made sure that they look for headphones that are relatively flat. Even things like, the M50X, those are quite popular. Some Sennheiser HD280s, the HD600s or the HD650s. Like, you can get some really good headphones that are flat enough that even without something like SoundID Reference to do corrective EQ, you can just listen to them and you'll be able to figure out your mixes. I can't speak for either the multi-channel or for the speaker variants because I don't use them. I've only used the headphone one. If you're setting up an actual studio for multi-channel sound, I would assume that you would be getting your acoustics treated, so you wouldn't necessarily need something like this. Unless you wanted to save money and not spend a lot of time and money with someone who would then acoustically treat a room, or maybe if you're setting it up as a home setup and you're kind of doing it as a DIY sort of thing, this might fit in. If I would say that the stereo version for the stereo speakers, that would make a lot more sense, because you might be someone who's moving to a desk and you want to have a way to have really good speaker sound and not have to worry about whether the room is set up to be perfect or not, especially if you're moving between rented apartments or something like that. If you want to try out a trial, or you want to purchase SoundID Reference based off of this review, I have an affiliate link in the description below. It would really help me out. However, don't feel like you have to buy it. I'm just doing this video so that you have an idea as to what this tool can do a year on. That's literally it. That's the only reason I'm doing this video. I don't mind. If you don't buy it, if you don't click the link, that's absolutely fine. It's cool. On saying that, thank you very much for watching. Rocco, he's happy again, so that's good. That means he's not going to steal any of my breakfast. Enjoy the rest of your day. Cool.